Okay, Chris, so I want to talk about this a little bit. And obviously, now we're into the rocket science space. So I'm going to turn this over to you. But first off, you mentioned there's kind of three models. So if you want to talk about the three models and explain kind of the difference between them, you're welcome to. And then if you would, I'd like you to dive in and kind of logistically talk through how AI can apply to e-commerce and the marketplace, which is what we're kind of talking about today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ron. And this stuff is really exciting, and machine learning, deep learning, AI, they're sort of, respectively subsets of each other as you sort of go up. And ultimately, machine learning is this really high payoff, very tactically effective area of AI that's happening right now. And it's really a renaissance. And sort of the powerhouse that's driving this is big data coming into play. With a lot of the GPUs and other methods for computing these AI models and making them open source. And what's really interesting about this, Ron, is we talked about, there are sort of three main areas that we can break these into. And this is really helpful for e-commerce operations to understand, just from a conceptual level, exactly how this impacts a marketplace. And this really generally applies to e-commerce too, but you want to understand that you're sort of dealing with different types of engines. Whenever you're dealing with large language models, you're dealing with what is typically referred to as transformers. And the large language models, there are a lot of really incredible transformer models. And think of a model as like a trained AI. There are some really incredible models that are out there that have been trained at the expense of literally millions and millions, if not tens and tens of millions of dollars, that you can then take and fine tune. There's a concept called fine tuning, which is sort of like, there's a progression from prompt engineering to fine tuning. And you can actually train these data sets that companies have spent tens of millions of dollars on, give them a little bit more information that's specific to your space. So think about your niche within your marketplace. And, this idea is that we're breaking this into three sections, and we're talking right now about large language models. So within the space of large language models, how can we fine tune this massive, incredible data set that's been trained and focus it in on a specific area that you specialize in? And that's a really big strength that we can leverage. So how does this apply? Well, we can offer your users, whenever they're bringing their products in, we can offer them incredible product descriptions. And we can do verification that the image, by using our diffusion methods to validate the images and what the images are about, we can sort of decompose an image into text and then see if the images match the content that is written. Are they correlated? Whenever you're dealing with the marketplace, as you well know, Ron, this is one of the biggest challenges in making things self-service and automating them so that we can get things published and pushed out quickly. So you sort of have like multiple situations. One where the user doesn't have time or resources to add all of the content manually. So we can supplement that by leveraging these large language models to sort of auto create bullets or even robust content based on the products that are in this marketplace. And we can fine tune the models so that they are taught. Think of this as like an incredible content writer that's been trained for 25 years, but they've never worked within your space. And what you're doing basically is you're training them for like 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a year on your content, depending on how much fine tuning you want to do of the data model. And then you're basically getting the AI so that it has training in your specific space. And then whenever you prompt it for the content by integrating it into your e-commerce, into your marketplace, then it's going to have a lot of good data that it will pull from, in addition to all of its many, years of experience in this example of being a great content writer. And that's, sort of the crux of what you get. And this can be really helpful for reviews. Like it can be trained to look at reviews and see what are good reviews and what are bad reviews. what are acceptable reviews and what are unacceptable reviews. Another thing that's really helpful is emails. How do you prioritize the emails that come in from your marketplace? And as you scale up, these are real challenges that need to be, solved for. And wherever possible, we want to respond with intelligent content for the users while also giving them a status and moving them into a hands-on support method. And so this goes into chat. There are a lot of studies run on chat with, how it can be extremely frustrating to customers if their sort of first line of defense from a company is a chatbot that's stupid and is horrible.
Right.
Couldn't be more frustrated, as a user if you're having to deal with some chat or IVR system that's not going to actually help. But you can do things that are intelligent where, the AI is picking up on the tone really quickly of the user. And even just the first message from the user, it can detect if it just needs to go straight to a human right away. And then there's also the ability to sort of like augment people. So AI with chatbots doesn't just have to be responding directly to somebody, which it can do really well in certain situations, but it can also take the messages that it's seeing and provide recommendations to your customer service reps and help them to sort of automate some of their steps, provide them with recommended templates or responses. And so the list goes on, but these are some really powerful aspects of marketplace e-commerce that AI can help drive. And they're kind of boring, right? I mean, a lot of these are kind of boring. They're not sexy necessarily. It's just rote tasks that have to get done at scale. And that would be my summary, in general about AI right now, is that it's very powerful to at least augment and in some cases like replace the workload for rote tasks when it comes to the language side of things. I'm curious if you want to sort of go into some more detail on some examples around the language side, Ron, or maybe even look at some of the other topics within that you're thinking of.
Yeah, I mean, not a ton of them. I'm just, I love hearing you talk about these things. I mean, for me, as obviously on the marketing side of things, I always struggle because we're trying to increase sales, we're trying to increase conversions, and a significant amount of that. And half the time while you were talking, I was mad in my head because I remember calling my insurance company about a month ago and I took about 20 minutes. And no matter what I did, I yelled, I screamed, I swore, I went through every single menu option. You could not get to a real person. And I remember being frustrated in my head. I was going through that while you were talking. Yes. It's so true. But for the e-commerce side of things, as a writer, how do I increase conversions and how do I increase the experience? And you kind of touch base on a lot of it, right? It's, you want to be able to see the reviews. You want to be able to get access to the reviews easily. But most importantly, and I think you're on it, it's the SEO content, which a lot of that has to do with the really well-written and unique product descriptions, right? And images. And then also with the, Section 508 ADA compliance to have really good ARIA labels and alt tags for those descriptions too. And that's where I see AI really coming into play now to be able to, there are a lot of different third-party APIs out there that have billions of products, right? And product information and weights and sizes and things like that you can sign up for. So it's not difficult for us with our clients, right, to sign up with these APIs and get a lot of great dimensional weights for shipping, right? That's a big one for a lot of our clients. We can sign up with an API to get all that data. But the thing that they can't give us because of the duplicate content is they can't give us product descriptions. They always charge for that, and they always charge to write new and unique product descriptions, and they charge for each one. And that's where it becomes really expensive. So if you could train and get an AI tool or platform to go through and write those descriptions for you, even if it just takes the first swag at it, that is probably the biggest time consumer, right? Aside from generating and building and standardizing on a beautiful set of images, right? You want your catalog to look good. I can't tell you how many times I go to a catalog and you can tell there was not a strategy in place when they tactically went through and put their images together. Nothing frustrates me more than that, right? It's like walking up to a beautiful home, opening up, and every room in the house is dirty. And then there's this one room that's clean. It just doesn't make sense. So yeah, for the e-commerce, it really helps. to you can train AI for more than just content, right? You can train AI on behaviors. So what do you and I want to promote on our site next week? Well, do we promote things that are not selling? Right? Because we're looking at all the items out there, realize we have a lot of high stock on a particular item that's not moving, and we don't want it to get old. So we want to move those items. Or do we want to capitalize on trends where the latest trend is the Tamagotchi? And so we need to push those really crazy. And what are we doing? Right. And a lot of those business decisions, the faster you make them, the more revenue you make. Right. And sometimes our marketplaces are so big that we don't see the trends clearly. We don't understand what's going on behind the scenes. And sometimes it could take a significant amount of time for us to pick up on these changes and these trends, and we may not be able to capitalize on them like we should. So for me, it's all about the BI, right? AI to me leads alphabetically to BI. And that's how I like to think about it in my head. The more information that I have, the more intelligent it is, and the faster I can make those decisions, the more money and the more conversions you're going to make, right?
Yeah. I think that's a great segue into tabular data and analytics, because really what you're hitting on there is very pragmatic, and it's substantially been a solved problem within, deep learning, machine learning for many years, actually. Tabular data is like one of the easier areas and simpler that is sort of out there. And the general methodology for solving tabular data has been optimized, like I said, for, depending on who you talk to, like 3 to 5 years. And it's extremely powerful. It includes, key areas like what you described, where we have this feedback loop, where we're doing things where we can bring in the large language models and like make much better search recommendations, or like intelligently understand what people are searching for when they type something in. But in addition to that, we need to also be able to just look at the data for our analytics on our site and intuit out what people actually want in their browsing experience and their searching experience and their purchasing experience, what recommendations we provide. This is absolutely critical in a marketplace and in e-commerce in general. We all know this. On sites that are very successful, they ultimately have some of the best search results in the world. And just a small percentage improvement to search results can make all the difference for your end user. And this is easy to talk about. It's not necessarily easy to execute on. AI really helps it a lot. There's a really interesting, powerful thing with AI where you can take your tracking and analytics that, just as a side note, your e-commerce platform, your marketplace platform should have some level of detailed analytics to use that's baked into the platform. It should have its own, direct analytics that it's tracking. And you can then leverage that set of analytics for, what visitors, which visit, what pages they've viewed, what their time was on the page, if they bounced, what actions did they take. You could call these events, what type of events, what are the goals of the site, and what's the weighting. And then this becomes a giant feedback loop, doesn't it? And so we can then see, based on different user personas, that the AI can learn on its own. Well, it can present, once it determines, hey, this person is looking at this, and people who looked at this tend to appreciate these recommendations. And it has the luxury of years of data in many cases of, if they did this, then they ended up purchasing this, and these are the happiest customers. So I'm going to tend to recommend this to them. And then it's a feedback loop that can happen. And it's very pervasive throughout the data. You've got recommendations for products they might be interested in, updating the search. So not just having an intelligent search, but literally having a search that matches Ron or Chris, or to you, the listener, like your own specific search. As you go through the site, you're training it based on how long you dwell on a page. and how you interact with a product detail page. How do you interact with different sellers in the marketplace? That's going to determine who we promote in the search results. And it's pretty simple stuff, but it's really powerful. Another thing that's really helpful is the pricing. Being able to promote the pricing that's going to make the most sense to you as a user. There are specific scenarios where, depending on the business model, somebody may be most interested in big promotions and sales, whereas someone else is mostly interested in the quality level, regardless of the price. And we need to be able to learn that. The other thing I would say is, just generally speaking, there's a lot of value that can be had in sort of the downstream processes as they get the item into the checkout, into the cart, and start going through the checkout. How are we following up with them intelligently? And this is where there can be a nice combination of all of the different types of AI, with the large language model to cater some of the content and the tabular data, so that we can see what's working best of the different variations of the content that we send to them as a cart abandonment email. Or maybe we're sending them hey, you bought this. A lot of customers also really like these accessories. And sometimes these can seem like cliche things, but they're really pragmatic in a marketplace. You're trying to scale this thing and automate it and make it self-service, and people really need what you're offering. And if you really understand that, then you want to offer them the most value. And if you have high credibility with your interactions with your customers, they're great with the transactional emails. They like the recommendations because you're actually genuinely helping them. And AI can really empower this at scale. That's what's so exciting about it. So really marrying that tabular data with the large language models. And the other thing that I would say here is, it's really, really helpful for things like moderation, to be able to sort of see, like, from a tabular data perspective, what are people's behavior when they're reading a review? What do they do? Because we have analytics that we can see, like, do they then buy something after they read this review, or do they not buy it? And this is like pretty deep data that we can get at to make your platform totally unique in your space. Because a lot of your competition probably won't be doing these things yet. The other thing that I'll say, Ron, around this is like lead times and pricing for specific customers, and understanding like how to optimize the fulfillment side of this can be really key for certain businesses too. And having this tabular data can help us to calculate inventory, warehouse fulfillment, and optimizing that supply chain side of things to actually fulfill these orders. And, that may sound relatively complex, but what are some areas that are obvious that need to be optimized for, but you have a manual process right now? And how can we just take a chunk of it and automate it? And so the tabular data side of AI can at least help get some of these simpler areas and start automating them. And then it can become very sophisticated very quickly, where, within 6 months to a year, you're offering literally one of the most sophisticated fulfillment and logistical, automations that is in your space. You just have to start. You have to start thinking about it and get your mind open to the idea that it is achievable to leverage AI to be like another worker. Think of AI as like a baseline worker who's looking at the data for you and has, they're not going to be as skilled as you are. AI isn't at that level yet, but it's going to be able to make some basic, reasonable decisions based on the data. And you may be pleasantly surprised at some of the awesome decisions it does come up with, because it does look at all of the data and it has that power. Whereas human beings really, they can only contain so much data, right? So those are just some of the things that I would point out with tabular data. And I would love to get your thoughts on this. It extends into some of the marketing and sales automation and outreach that we can do there. But any thoughts before we move on to the imagery side of things?
Yeah, I love the fact that you called it a worker, right? Because that was the entire time you were talking. The thing that I thought about that really is missing in the marketplace is the human element, right? And the thing that AI can do is it can pick up on nuances And I'm going to give you a quick example here. So for example, if I went out and I typed in the search, well, let's just take laptops, right? Let's take gaming laptops. You and I sell gaming laptops on our marketplace. So one of the things that we like to do, and again, based on are we trying to move these because they're not selling, or are we trying to capitalize on a trend, we'll usually have something called like deals, or we'll have something called featured, right? And so usually when people will click on laptops, they might come to a landing page and we might have a little carousel that goes through our featured laptops, and we might have 6 laptops there. But think about the person that actually comes and does the search at the top. If they walked into a Best Buy and they asked these 2 questions, and listen to the nuance difference. What is the best gaming laptop you have? That's question number 1. What is the best deal on a gaming laptop that you have? One word difference between those 2, yet they couldn't be further apart, could they? Because one is the 18-year-old kid looking for the $10,000 Alienware, right? And the other one is a parent trying to get a good deal on a gaming laptop for Christmas because they got to buy for all the kids, right? So different. So when they go in and do a search and say best gaming laptop versus best deal on gaming laptop, if we could serve up a different set of laptops that perfectly match the search, that puts, and again, you said it's not quite as good as a human, but it puts that human element back in, because now you're truly serving up what they're asking for, not necessarily what you've got as your featured laptops or even the top sellers. Maybe the top selling laptops have nothing to do today with gaming, right? And so even if we have a semi-dynamic list that shows our top sellers, if the top sellers aren't gaming laptops, then the top sellers and the featured laptops have nothing to do with what they asked for, right? So anyway, as you were talking through, I really love the fact you called it worker, because I was thinking the whole time about adding a little bit of that human element back in and literally kind of hand holding and guiding them a little closer to what they're actually asking for, not to what we're typically, I mean, we always think in marketing that we're building these goals and funnels, right? Where we're guiding them. In all actuality, that's how we do conversions to do what we want them to do. But how do they convert, and how do they do what they want to do? And I think that's the difference where AI can come in and really help, right?
Yeah, this is a really powerful aspect about the conversation with AI, because you sort of get into this scenario where different focus areas of AI can feed off of each other. So the example that you gave there is really powerful, because one of the ways that we can best optimize for that situation is decomposing the request and then leveraging tabular data. And it's really interesting because a large language model would best decompose, typically best decompose that search request, where you nuanced the fact that they're asking for either the best gaming laptop or the best laptop or the best deal. And those being, minor variations in the phrasing, but huge difference in the results that they're looking for and the persona. And so what's really cool is, like, if you get into the mechanics, and I won't bore everyone with the details, but please hit me up if you're interested, because I love to talk about it. But ultimately, the mechanics are really powerful. You're dealing with matrices, and this data, like the search that they type in, gets decomposed into like chunks of words and phrases. And anyway, the point is that by putting a large language model in front of tabular model, then you can basically combine the best of both. And so you almost get like this, it's like having multiple people sitting there talking to you at the Best Buy. So it's like the manager is there and they interpret the question. And then you have the tech, who then, once the question gets translated to the tech properly, then the tech goes and gets the perfect answer. But if it was a tech, they would miss the nuance probably. Like they would miss that word deal. I want the best deal. And then they would show this parent a $10,000 machine, and the parent would be like, oh my God, I'm going to a different store, and that's what happens on your website. Right. And like, ultimately, that's the power of leveraging multiple of these sort of like facets of AI and machine learning. Now, just kind of speaking to some of the facets, the other thing that we wanted to hit on is the imagery side of it. And this is pretty powerful too. So here you are, you have this marketplace platform and you have people uploading stuff to your site, right? Maybe it's coming in through an integration, EDI, CXML, or maybe people are just bulk uploading it or manually uploading content about their products. Well, how do you know if a product image has already been uploaded? How do you know if the one that's already there is better than the new one somebody's trying to upload, or vice versa? How do you then know if the product description is matching the image? How do you know if it's not a really bad image that should never be on your website? These are things that, they cost you money as a marketplace administrator if you don't have some form of, forum and moderation that you're leveraging within your community. And most marketplaces don't have their community moderating everything. They're going to be leveraging internal folks that are paid. And one of the best ways to leverage AI with imagery is to be able to sort of decompose what's in the image. Does it match the text? Vice versa. Does the text match the image? Is this a good image or not? One of the things that I mentioned earlier was fine tuning. And this is such a key aspect for people to take away from the AI conversation, is that you can take a model that's already been built, that's cost literally millions and millions to tens of millions of dollars to generate. And you can then fine tune it for your business. So think about this for imagery, Ron. Someone has 10,000 products and they don't have images for any of them. They're all sitting in their ERP system and they don't have really good marketing content either. But we know that they have 200 or 500 images and descriptions that are really good. So we take that data, we train the model with that. Maybe we even train it with some competitor sites. And then we basically have it learn this space that you're in. And then once it's learned that, and it's sort of knows that that's where it needs to weight things heavily toward, then it's not going to be perfect, but it will be able to bias toward your space and what you've trained it on. And that's called fine tuning a model. Okay. So now think of this for images. The mechanics of images are really interesting, and I won't go into all the details. I'll just give a summary for everyone. The way that AI works is it's sort of like this massive amount of throwing spaghetti against a wall. And a great way to think about it is you have people standing, and they're standing against a wall. And you tell the AI, I want you to tell me who it is and how many hairs they have on their head, and what position they're holding their hands in, their legs in, and what their facial expression is. But all you can do is throw spaghetti against the wall. So AI literally does curve fitting, is how the mechanics work with matrices. But just imagine throwing really tiny little pieces of spaghetti against every single part of the wall and getting feedback on everyone. Did that hit a person? Did that hit a person? Did that hit a person? What's the shape of it? And just getting it down to this multi-billion, multi-trillion variable levels of little pieces of spaghetti you throw. And eventually you get this high fidelity outline of what's going on with wherever you throw the spaghetti against the wall. And that's basically what it's doing. It's just running this big, massive curve fitting on whatever data it's trained on. And what's crazy about that is I wouldn't necessarily call it intelligence, but it creates this memory that it gets of whatever you train it on that's really, really insightful. And it really represents the data typically quite well. And so you can get it to sort of reproduce content that you fine tune it on. Now take this to images. Well, with images, some of the researchers that came up with diffusion tried this really interesting thing where they wanted to see if they could take images that they already knew looked a certain way, and they do what's called labeling. So you take an image that looks a certain way. Let's say this is a portrait of Ron Halverson looking awesome in a webinar. Okay. And then they basically label that and state that's what it is. And then they train it with the AI. And that's the input, is your perfect picture with a label on it. Well, then they tried adding noise to it and then telling the AI, like, these are all pictures of Ron, these are pictures of Chris. And they added noise to it until they could add like 80% of the picture was just noise. 90% was noise. And the AI with the right text input could go from the noise to a picture of Chris, from the noise and some text to a picture of Ron. So if you sort of go to the limit and you just have noise, well, basically what you can do is you can draw like a stick figure of whatever you want, give it to the AI, and it can denoise that and go from a basic image, think of like a noised image that it's been trained on over and over, all these images that it's been trained on and gotten feedback like, yes, this is a picture of a house. It just had 90% noise on it, and you figured that out. This is a picture of a product of a certain type that matches your marketplace. This is an automobile. This is a diamond ring. This is a manufacturing, automation tool. And it's able to take the text with a stick figure picture. Again, that's represented by adding 90% noise to an image. It makes it effectively a stick figure and then denoising it. And this is called diffusion. And it's really cool because basically what the AI is doing is it's learning through literally all of these mass number of, training models that it goes through, how to take a stick figure and then denoise it into an amazing image. Well, now take this and apply it practically to marketplace e-commerce. How many products have images that are not that great? What if you fine-tune this model that's really good at making images from basically nothing, and then you fine-tune it on images within your niche, and then teach it to make reasonably representative images? That can be helpful, and you would want to caveat things. You're not necessarily going to want to say like this is an actual image of this product, because it's not, but it can be helpful and instructive, especially for categories and things like that. The other thing that you can do is then you can read the image and see if the image matches the product and see if the quality level is of a certain level. So you can decompose the image and sort of understand, like, comparatively to high quality images, is it good? Does it have content that shouldn't be there? It's capable of seeing if, the content is of a certain category by just understanding, like, taking an image and turning it to text and then analyzing the text. And so this can be really, really powerful. Again, thinking about a marketplace and scaling, you're going to want to be able to present images that are smart and useful to the user. This can be done by fine-tuning a diffusion model that can generate some useful images. And you can note that they're placeholders, but it can at least be somewhat representative. The other thing that you can do is you can make sure to audit images that people are uploading and make sure that you're picking automatically the best images for users to look at. And this can extend to other areas. An example would be like, if a business wants to submit their profile and they take pictures of their facility, is it BS or is it a real facility that's credible? And, you can do a lot with this. Like, if they say they have a manufacturing facility or fulfillment capability, take pictures of it and upload it and let the automated tool sort of deliver, a probability that the image matches what they're saying they have. And this can just be really useful in automating certain aspects of your marketplace. So again, you can kind of combine these together and deliver a powerful punch for your users that's just way more dynamic than what you would otherwise have without it. Obviously, there's a lot of traction that you can get by fine-tuning these images. That would be one of the most powerful things. But how do you do that? And how do you select a partner that's really good at these things? Well, I would say in general, they need to understand these concepts. They need to understand that you can fine tune your models. There is a lot, Ron, about licensing that's important to consider with commercial use cases. A lot of these open source libraries are explicitly, requesting or limiting access for commercial usage. And they don't want it used commercially. A lot of them just want to be compensated. And so you want to work with a partner who not only understands how to execute on it, but also the licensing and legal implications Not legal advice, just these are things to be aware of as an educational perspective.
Yeah, there are definitely a lot of different licenses out there, right? I mean, when somebody says GPU, what is that? Is that a graphics processor, or is that the general license that they're talking about on some of these open source, right? So having a partner that can understand the legalese of the licenses and that can do that research and can talk through the different models. Which model's better, the language model, the tabular data model? How are we going to use it? What are we trying to accomplish in the marketplace? So thanks, Chris. I know that was something I couldn't have done on my own. I really appreciate the insight you had on those 3 areas. So I think that'll close off this video, and we'll head on into the next topic.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. Thanks, everyone. See you in the next one. Bye for now.
Bye for now.